cameras flashed, the world just kind of froze as the devastating news broke on October 28th, 2023. We had lost Chandler Bing.
Yeah, the shock was just absolute. The entire globe was mourning Matthew Perry.
Right, but the real shock wasn't just that he died. It was the chilling truth of who was in the room with him when it happened, and the completely heartbreaking excuse they gave the world to justify it. Welcome to Starscope Report. Join Jordan and Jamie as they uncover Hollywood drama, music industry shakeups, and viral influencer scandals. From red carpet surprises to social media controversies, we dive deep into the stories behind the fame.
It's a story that starts with a massive, heartbreaking loss, but it immediately plunges into a sprawling, multi-layered criminal network.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the kind of network you'd expect in a gritty crime thriller, not the real life of a beloved sitcom star.
For sure. And we have a massive stack of, frankly, devastating sources to unpack for you today. We are looking at federal court indictments, sentencing memos straight from the Department of Justice, insights on federal drug laws from the legal experts over at Leopard Law, and this is the hardest part to read, the incredibly emotional victim impact letters written by Matthew Perry's grieving family.
Those letters are just gut-wrenching.
They really are. So the mission for this deep dive is to untangle the 5 people indicted in his death. We're going to explore the mechanics of federal conspiracy, what that actually means legally, and ultimately, we have to try to comprehend the staggering betrayal by the man who was supposed to be his closest protector.
Yeah, because to truly comprehend how a tragedy of this magnitude happens, you have to look past the Hollywood glare.
Right.
Before we even examine the underground drug rings or the corrupt medical professionals, we have to start at the very center, the inner circle.
Which brings us to our first major revelation today. The love-in assistant. This is a man whose sole professional purpose for $150,000 a year was maintaining Perry's sobriety.
Right.
And he ended up delivering the fatal dose, and then, unbelievably, he asked for a financial payout after the fact. I mean, I want to start by understanding who this guy actually is. What was his day-to-day role?
So his name is Kenneth Iwamasa, and according to the letters submitted by Perry's family, specifically his mother, Suzanne Morrison, and his sister, Caitlin Iwamasa, wasn't just like an administrative assistant scheduling meetings or picking up dry cleaning.
No, not at all.
He was hired in 2022 to be Perry's companion and guardian. His entire job description centered around protecting Perry from his own heavily documented battles with addiction.
And the family made it explicitly clear to him, right? I mean, they essentially gave him a massive safety net.
Exactly.
If Matthew ever demanded drugs, all Iwamasa had to do was pick up the phone and call the family. If he did that, his job was 100% safe.
Yeah, he had a literal get-out-of-jail-free card provided by the people paying his salary.
So why on earth didn't he use it? That is the big question.
Well, that is the core of his legal defense's argument, and it's a really controversial one.
Oh, I bet.
According to court filings and reports from TMZ, Iwamasa's team claims that he couldn't, and this is a quote, simply say no to Perry because of the employment dynamic.
Okay, wait.
They're trying to paint a picture of a massive power imbalance.
I see.
The argument is that because Perry was this powerful, wealthy Hollywood boss, Iwamasa was just a helpless employee acting under immense pressure. Like, he was unable to refuse his boss's demands.
Yeah, I have to stop you there because I am really struggling to buy that narrative for a single second.
I don't blame you.
If you look at the evidence in the federal indictment, the whole helpless employee excuse completely shatters. If he's just a passive assistant cowering under a powerful boss, how do you explain the text messages?
Oh, the texts are incredibly damning. He was actively reaching out to underground drug middlemen.
Yes, and introducing himself by saying, "Alfred here, Batman's butler."
Yeah, that quote is just, wow.
Right. That does not sound like a terrified victim of a power dynamic. That sounds like someone who is actively enjoying the clandestine nature of the job.
Absolutely. He's using code names, he's negotiating prices.
Exactly. Are we really supposed to believe he was just following orders when he was the one independently sourcing the drugs, coordinating the drop-offs, and later hiding the evidence?
Legally, that defense is incredibly weak when faced with the sheer volume of his autonomous actions. But emotionally, when you read the victim impact statement from Perry's mother, the betrayal is just haunting.
Oh, it's so sad.
Because Iwamasa didn't run after Perry died.
Yeah.
He stayed. He actively played the role of the grieving, devoted friend to a family that had no idea what he had just done.
You read about this and your stomach just drops.
It really does.
Yeah.
He was sending Suzanne Morrison songs that reminded him of her son. He hand drew a little map to help her navigate the sprawling cemetery to visit Matthew's grave.
That is just sicky.
He told her he would call her whenever he saw a rainbow, because it was one of Matthew's favorite things.
Yeah.
And the most egregious part.
What?
He insisted on speaking at Matthew Perry's funeral.
Are you kidding me?
No. He stood up in front of the people who loved Perry the most and delivered a eulogy.
Wow. It's the ultimate Trojan horse. You invite someone into your inner sanctum to protect your child, and they become the architect of his demise.
Exactly.
And then, to add insult to fatal injury, when the massive financial payout from the estate didn't happen, he threatened legal action.
Yeah, he tried to squeeze a settlement out of workers' compensation.
It is staggering, the audacity.
And if you look at the cold, hard timeline of those final days, the negligence is terrifying. The indictment reveals that in his final month, Iwamasa found Perry unconscious not once, but twice.
Twice.
Utterly unresponsive. And yet, he kept going. By his own admission, Iwamasa injected Matthew Perry with ketamine 27 times in his final 5 days.
27 shots in 5 days. That is insane. But wait, how does a personal assistant with absolutely zero medical training get his hands on thousands of dollars worth of clinical anesthetics?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. And how does he learn exactly how to inject them into human tissue? The answer involves 2 real licensed doctors and a text message that will frankly make your blood boil. That's coming up.
Mm-hmm.
If you're captivated by these dark Hollywood twists, make sure you hit that subscribe button. The story only gets wilder from here.
So we established that the assistant couldn't execute this operation in a vacuum. He needed a reliable, high-grade supply.
Right.
And tragically, the medical professionals who took a Hippocratic oath to do no harm looked at a vulnerable, struggling star and just saw an ATM machine.
We're talking about 2 licensed physicians here, Dr. Salvador Plasencia, who goes by Dr. P in the text messages, and Dr. Mark Chavez.
Yeah.
According to the court indictments and reporting from The Guardian, how exactly did they get the drugs in the first place?
So Dr. Chavez used his medical credentials to obtain ketamine from a wholesale distributor under completely false pretenses.
Wow.
He leveraged his legitimate license to buy bulk supply, which he then funneled directly to Dr. Plasencia.
So you have 2 guys with actual medical degrees operating like a street-level cartel.
Basically, yeah.
They were even using code words, calling the vials of ketamine bottles of Dr. Pepper.
It's so callous.
But the text message that really exposes the psychology here is from Plasencia to Chavez. What exactly did he say?
He texted Chavez, and this is a direct quote from the federal indictment, "I wonder how much this moron will pay."
How much this moron will pay.
Yeah.
It is just barefaced exploitation. I mean, they knew Perry was wealthy, they knew he was an addict, and they knew he was desperately seeking more ketamine than his regular legal therapy doctors would safely provide.
Exactly.
Between September and October 2023, they allegedly drained $55,000 in cash from him.
But the financial extortion, as bad as it is, kind of pales in comparison to the physical endangerment. Look at October 12th, 2023. This is just over 2 weeks before Perry died. The indictment outlines a really terrifying moment. Dr. Plasencia went to Perry's house and administered a massive dose of ketamine.
Yeah, the indictment says Perry had a severe adverse medical reaction.
He did.
His systolic blood pressure spiked dangerously high, and his entire body just froze. He couldn't speak, he couldn't move. I need you to explain the mechanics of this for us. Why does ketamine cause someone to freeze like that? What is it actually doing to the human body?
That's a really crucial point to understand. So ketamine is a dissociative anesthetic.
Okay.
It essentially blocks the NMDA receptors in your brain, which disconnects your brain's perception of pain and environmental stimuli from your physical body.
Wow.
It was originally developed as a battlefield anesthetic. At lower doses, it can create a feeling of detachment or euphoria, which is, why it's abused.
Right.
But at the massive doses Plasencia was administering, you enter what's called a K-hole. Your motor functions just shut down. You are literally trapped inside your own body, unable to articulate words or move your limbs, even though you might still be somewhat conscious.
That sounds like an absolute nightmare. So he is chemically paralyzed on his own couch?
Yeah.
You would think almost killing one of the most famous actors on the planet would be a massive wake-up call for a doctor to cut his losses and run.
You'd really think so. Plasencia actually turned to the assistant, Iwamasa, and said, "Let's not do that again."
Right.
But the allure of the cash was just too strong. They didn't stop selling. In fact, Dr. Plasencia left syringes behind at the house and gave Iwamasa, a man with zero medical training, remember, a tutorial on where and how to inject the drugs into Perry's body himself.
It's breathtaking negligence, which brings me to the legal side of this. I was looking at the insights from Leopard Law regarding 21 U.S.C. Section 846. This is the statute for federal conspiracy to traffic ketamine, but I'm not a lawyer. I struggle to understand how a licensed doctor operating out of a shiny clinic gets slapped with the exact same federal conspiracy charge you'd give a cartel boss. How does that leap happen?
It's a really powerful tool that the Justice Department uses to dismantle networks. As Leopard Law explains, to secure a federal conspiracy conviction, prosecutors don't actually have to prove that a specific drug deal was completed.
Really?
Yeah. They only have to prove 3 elements. First, an agreement between 2 or more people to violate federal drug laws. Second, the intent to distribute. And third, an overt act that furthers the conspiracy.
Okay, let me see if I have this right. Think of it like planning a bank robbery.
Okay.
Just sitting in your living room talking about robbing a bank isn't necessarily a federal conspiracy.
Although let's just talk.
But the moment you drive to a hardware store and buy ski masks, that is your overt act.
Yes.
You've taken a tangible step to execute the crime. So in this case, leaving those syringes behind for the assistant, that's buying the ski masks.
That is a perfect analogy.
Exactly.
Or, as outlined in overt act number 14 of the indictment, meeting in a public parking lot in Long Beach to hand over cash and inject drugs in the back of a car.
Wow.
That is an undeniable overt act. And in federal court, sentencing for this is heavily influenced by cooperation. Dr. Chavez, the one who sourced the drugs wholesale, recognized the mountain of evidence against him. He cooperated early, surrendered his medical license, and pleaded guilty. Because he played ball, he received 8 months of home confinement.
8 months at home for his role.
Yeah.
And Dr. Plasencia, the one who sent the moron text, the outline of the sentencing memos notes he's looking at roughly 2.5 years if convicted.
It demonstrates how the justice system leverages lower-level conspirators to build an ironclad case. They trade leniency for testimony.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we have the assistant and the corrupt doctors. But there's a missing link in this chain. Because eventually, the doctors got spooked, or they just ran out of supply. A Hollywood film director acting as a drug bagman, and a woman known in the underworld as the Ketamine Queen.
The story takes a really dark turn here.
The final days of Matthew Perry's life are about to be revealed, and I just have to say, stories like this remind us that the truth is often much darker than fiction. Stay tuned and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what's coming next in our deep dives.
So the medical supply dries up. But the assistant, Iwamasa, is desperate to keep his $150,000 a year job going, which means he has to keep his boss supplied.
Right.
He has a multimillionaire demanding clinical anesthetics, but he doesn't have a prescription pad anymore. Where do you go?
You go to the streets.
Exactly. You go to the Hollywood black market. Enter Eric Fleming.
A Hollywood producer acting as a drug runner.
Yes. Fleming directed a 1999 movie called My Brother and the Pig with a young Scarlett Johansson. And he produced the early 2000s reality show, The Surreal Life.
Okay, so he's in the industry.
Right, but in the context of this indictment, he is acting as a glorified cartel bagman. He is taking literal bags of cash from Iwamasa and delivering them to a woman named Jasmine Sangha.
And Sangha is the one the Department of Justice officially refers to as the Ketamine Queen.
Yes, she is a major node in this network. She had been operating a high-end underground drug delivery service out of her North Hollywood home for at least 5 years.
Wow.
When federal agents finally raided what they call the Sangha stash house, they found a staggering amount of narcotics. 79 vials of ketamine, 1.4 kilograms of methamphetamine pills, cocaine, and fraudulently obtained prescription drugs.
That's massive.
The U.S. attorney described it as a drug-selling emporium.
And it was that specific emporium that supplied the final lethal batch. Let's walk through the timeline of that final day, October 28, 2023, because the pacing of it is it's agonizing.
It really is.
At 8:30 in the morning, Iwamasa gives Perry the first injection.
4 hours pass. It's early afternoon, and Iwamasa administers a second shot of ketamine.
And then, just 40 minutes later, not even an hour after a heavy dose of a clinical anesthetic, Perry allegedly looks at his assistant and says, "Shoot me up with a big one."
Yeah.
And then he gets into a hot tub. I need to understand this physiologically, too. Why is that specific combination A high dose of ketamine and a body of water, an almost guaranteed death
It
sentence.
goes back to how ketamine affects the brain, like we were talking about earlier. Ketamine heavily suppresses your body's natural defense mechanisms.
Right.
Normally, if you fall asleep in a bathtub and your face slips under the water, your body's survival instinct kicks in instantly.
You wake up.
Exactly. Carbon dioxide builds up in your blood, your brain sends a panic signal, and
Yeah.
you thrash awake to gasp for air.
It's automatic.
But ketamine severs that communication. If you slip under the water while heavily dissociated, your brain never registers the panic, you don't thrash, you don't wake up, you simply and quietly drown. It is profoundly dangerous.
That is terrifying, which makes Iwamasa's next move completely incomprehensible. He prepares the hot tub, he administers that fatal third dose, the quote-unquote big one, and then he leaves the house to run errands. He leaves a chemically paralyzed man alone in a body of water.
The duty of care completely evaporated. And when he returns to find Perry unresponsive and dead, his first instinct isn't to call for emergency help or be transparent with first responders.
No, of course not.
His first instinct is a cover-up.
When the police arrive, he hands them a list of Perry's medications, but conveniently leaves ketamine completely off the list.
He then texts Eric Fleming, the middleman, telling him he has deleted everything. He physically gathered the empty vials and syringes and threw them in the trash to hide the evidence.
It's just so calculating.
It was only months later, after investigators served search warrants and meticulously reconstructed the digital footprints and text messages, that the entire conspiracy unraveled.
And the consequences are finally coming down. Eric Fleming pleaded guilty to his role as the bag man and received a 2-year prison sentence. Right.
Iwamasa, the assistant, pleaded guilty to conspiracy to distribute, resulting in death. Because he flipped and became the state's star witness, prosecutors are recommending 41 months in prison, so just under 3.5 years.
And Jasveen Sangha, the ketamine queen, is facing the heaviest potential penalty. If convicted on all charges, which include maintaining a drug-involved premises and multiple counts of distribution, she faces a minimum of 10 years and a maximum of life in prison.
When you zoom out and look at the entirety of this ecosystem, the scale of the betrayal is suffocating.
It truly is. You have a highly visible, beloved actor who is incredibly transparent about his lifelong battle with addiction.
He wrote a whole book about it.
Yes, he was actively trying to stay clean, and he surrounded himself with people he paid handsomely to help him do just that. But instead, he was systematically exploited by a 5-person network that spanned multiple levels of society.
You have his most trusted live-in caregiver, you have licensed medical doctors violating their oaths, you have Hollywood acquaintances acting as runners, and you have high-volume street dealers.
They all saw his vulnerability, and every single one of them chose to profit from it rather than protect him.
They isolated him within his own home, essentially turning his sanctuary into a drug den funded by his own wealth.
Which leaves me with a final chilling thought for you to mull over. If someone as wealthy, beloved, and heavily resourced as Matthew Perry can be so easily enveloped by a network of enablers, a network that completely blurs the line between high-end VIP medical care and literal cartel behavior, what does that actually say about the wellness industry in Hollywood?
That's a great question.
Are these concierge doctors actually practicing medicine, or have they just found a legal shield for high society drug dealing? It makes you wonder how many other Dr. P's are out there right now texting about their next vulnerable patient.
It exposes a massive blind spot in how we view elite medical care. A white coat doesn't automatically mean safety, especially when there is that much money on the table.
You've been listening to Starscope Report, where Jordan and Jamie uncover the stories shaping Hollywood, music, and pop culture. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that keep the stars shining.